To parent out of love is to parent out of, first, a commitment to breathing and slowing down yourself, to not reacting but responding. Secondly to that is a commitment to seek to understand instead of to be understood. Third to that is to look and provide empathy and support for what another person is going through.
All right, everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I got some special news, is that after very deep consideration, we've decided to be the Big Life podcast now, because we're exploring the big lives of our exceptional guests, and we look forward to giving you some more details about that. But first, we want to get in and introduce our guest. But before even that, I'm going to introduce my co-host, Chris Gray. Chris, what's going on?
Dmitri, what up, bro?
Living the dream, Chris. I'm excited to introduce our guest, Bryan Post, who is an author, entrepreneur, speaker in the adoption space. He's world-renowned. He's written books that have been read by, I don't know, Brian, millions probably, called, in particular, the most famous one, From Fear to Love, which is huge. And he's built multiple businesses around the adoption space, helped countless people, from the children and their parents and the communities. Bryan has done it all, and we're so excited to learn about the journey that he's taken so far. Bryan, thank you for coming on Big Life Podcast.
Hey, Dmitri and Chris, super excited and glad and honored to be here with you today.
Yeah, we're so excited. So I'm going to throw it. Chris, how about you start us off?
Oh, man, I don't even know where to start here. We have tried to hang out a few times, and it quite hasn't worked out just yet being the key word. I am excited about this podcast because it gives us a chance. I think we've had maybe one conversation, right? When we have like one Zoom meeting or something. But here, I look forward to getting into the weeds with you, man. I haven't told you this, but one of the things in my short, I've known you just over a year or so, somewhere around there. When I first met you, we were looking to adopt, my wife and I. We had gone through the entire process, like I told you, got to the home study, got to the very last day of the home study. By the way, for you people who don't know, the adoption process, at least here in Texas, is long. It's a lot of work, a lot of hours. Me and my wife power through it. We get through it, third day of the home study, and we realize that we are not the type of people that should be adopting kids. We are way too rigid. And it was a big kick in the nuts for us. And B, one of the things I appreciated about you when I first met you is when I told you this, I won't go into some of the reactions I got from some people around me when I was talking about it, but B looked at me and he said, well, you made the right decision. And you said it so matter of fact that you might not remember, but it was so matter of fact and so on point. And what you said mattered, but how you said mattered just as much. And so first, I want to thank you. But getting into it, a random place to start is what makes for somebody who probably shouldn't be adopting kids.
Oh, that's a really interesting question, because I don't know necessarily that I can say why someone shouldn't adopt kids. I can give you a framework, variables for people to consider. One is, like you said, see, people don't know they're rigid. People don't know they're set in their ways. They don't really know that until they get into the experience of it. And I think the thing people don't realize, and they don't know that they've experienced trauma. They don't realize that adoption, like all relationship, is emotional. It's not cognitive. See, we tend to engage things like we can just think them through or work them through in this cognitive way. But relationships and adoption and parenting, that's an emotional experience. And so then what that tends to lead to is a lot of stress. And so someone who would define themselves as being rigid definitely should not adopt, because adopted children are stress sensitive, they're fearful, and they have high emotional demands. They have high emotional needs because they come from painful places. Now, typically when we get stressed, the more stressed we become, the more rigid we become, and then you start to get into conflict. And I've just seen so many unfortunate situations where the most well-intended people go into adoption and it has disastrous outcomes. I mean, I've been doing this for 25 years, so I've seen the worst of the worst. And I'm just like not one of those people who is interested in shaming someone because they don't want to bring a child into their home. I mean, such a big deal, and it really needs to be thought through mindfully. And usually, states don't do the best job in preparing people or training them or even discouraging them. Because I would rather discourage you as opposed to you go forward. I mean, I've worked with children who've been in more than 50 placements before.
Oh
So
gosh.
through that process, they've had at least 10 failed adoptions. That kid's ruined for life. You know, their life is irreparably impacted, and I just don't want that for anyone.
And Bryan, I've been looking forward to talking to you about this because I know that in the way that you run your business is different than the traditional way, especially in the adoption space. So different, in fact, that people are confused by it oftentimes. And as far as I know, in the program one of the programs that you have is called Wraparound Service, and I want to know, how is that different and why does it work better? And then I think I'll have a follow-up for you after that, but let's go
Well,
ahead.
so fundamental. 23 years ago, after a lot of research and a lot of experience and a lifetime of being adopted and growing up in a home of conflict and was in foster care for a short period of time, I developed a model on human behavior called the stress model. And the significance is, as I dialed more into the work over the years, I came to realize that it is a completely different paradigm. So the stress model it's defined as all behavior arises from a state of stress. In between the behavior and the stress is the presence of a primary emotion. There are two primary emotions, love and fear. It's through the expression, the processing, and the understanding of the fear that you calm the stress and diminish the behavior. So when I say a paradigm is the way you see the world. The way in which we are programmed and conditioned, and the dominant model in our society is fear-based. We don't even recognize it. Most of us grew up in loving homes, but the relationship modeling and the parenting practices that we experience are not love based, they're actually fear based. So we grow up experiencing fear disguised as love. And then when we become adults, we parent our children with fear, thinking we're loving them when in fact we're not loving them. We're trying to control them or change them or suppress them because their behaviors make us feel stress and anxiety. Well, my paradigm is a love based paradigm. And it is just a different way of looking and seeing things. And so instead of, whereas a traditional model is focused on the behaviors, and I can explain, I can go into neuroscience about why that happens. But our traditional old paradigm model focuses on behavior. So looks at behaviors the way I was raised, the way you guys were raised. You do something, you get in trouble for it. So it's all behavior focused. My model is not focused on behavior. My model is focused on the stress that actually leads to the behavior. And between the behavior and the stress is a primary emotion. There are only two primary emotions, love and fear. Stress automatically generates fear, and that fear drives the behavior. So instead of just focusing on behavior, I just try to get people to shift their paradigm to start seeing behavior as a symptom of stress and fear. But first, you got to see stress and fear within yourself. And if you can't see stress and fear within yourself, it's almost impossible to see it in someone else. So my model really is a model of self-awareness and self-growth and self-understanding. And we're not really wired for self-understanding and developing mindfulness in our society. That's not a dominant perspective that we tend to take.
Now, I want to say that this also applies not just to adoptive families. This applies to all families. And speaking for myself, I've got two little kids, and you and I have chatted a little bit about this. But I think everyone is now asking the question, what does it look like to parent out of love?
So that is a beautiful question. And it is the most simple thing, yet the most difficult thing. To parent out of love is to parent out of, first, a commitment to breathing and slowing down yourself, to not reacting but responding. Secondly, to that is a commitment to seek to understand instead of to be understood. Third to that is to look and provide empathy and support for what another person is going through. So instead of trying to force your beliefs, your patterns, your blueprints on another person, especially your children, which that's the easiest for us to do, you support them right where they're at. You encourage them. You mold them through allowing them to become reflections of who they're supposed to be instead of who we think they're supposed to be. And the other thing is realizing that children are developing, they are not developed. The prefrontal cortex, which is your executive control center for all of your social and emotional relationships. So that part of your brain, that's the executive control center for all social and emotional relationships, doesn't complete its development for women at 21, for men 23 to 25. And that's if you've had no trauma. So we take children, because of all of our old blueprints, we take children by the time they're 2, we start treating them like little adults. Mm-hmm. And we wonder why they're stressed out and crazy all the time. It's because we're generating as much as the anxiety and stress for them as they're having to contend with trying to grow and develop and mature. So love really just requires slowing down. It requires, and the significance is that love is an experience. It's an energetic experience that is always available to us. It exists all the time. The only thing that keeps us out of love is fear. And the only thing that keeps us out of getting out of fear is just a simple ability to slow down and breathe in the midst of stress. And then you can step back into a presence of love. Love is all around us. It's the space that exists.
Oh, I'm loving this shit. All right. So then, B, the model that you just explained is it's a concept thing that you've made very simple, not easy, but you've simplified it. And you say in this takes a level of self-awareness to be effective, but for you to create the model, there was a level of self-awareness in you, and it's very apparent here. So with this self-awareness with B here, Bryan, where did this start, or was it developed? This question goes a few different ways, but I think you get where I'm going here.
Yeah, well, I always say that I was born to do what I do. So every moment from my conception and beyond, so the moments beyond were the moments that led up to my conception, and then all the moments after wired me and engineered me to understand this thing called adoption and also this thing called human behavior in just a different way. Because being adopted, being in foster care, having a biological mother who had trauma, a biological father who had trauma, and then being adopted to two loving but traumatized adopted parents who had all kinds of issues, and then all the challenges growing up, it just prepared me. It created a foundation. And then I've always been an entrepreneur. So I was fortunate to have a mentor who basically just re-stimulated a seed in my brain when I was 25 years old and said, hey, you could start your own business. And it's like he just watered that seed that had just been laying there dormant. And I had my master's degree, and I thought, well, you know what? I can start a mental health business. And at 25, I started my first social service venture into entrepreneurship. And it's just been one growth inciting thing after another. But yeah, I realized really early, I started studying Buddhism when I was like 18 years old. And that is probably the beginning of starting to really look at myself to actually come outside of myself and start looking at myself. I don't think I'd ever done that before. And I was raised in the church, and I'm not a Buddhist, but that that path into Buddhism actually brought me back into Christianity, brought me back into the faith and the belief of Christ and the message that Christ set forward, just as a moment of insightfulness, of awareness. And then you just keep developing over time. And I've always been a part of my trauma being adopted is I've always questioned authority. So I've always had authority issues. So I've never really taken anything for just because someone tells me it, that's the truth, because I don't see things that way. It has to really line up and make sense for me. So that all kind of falls into place as well.
I find it very interesting when you mention the whatever happened prior to conception, because it seems like there's things that are outside of our control even before we're born that affect us in our lives, and especially in adoptive homes. And it seems like, I mean, it happened in your life. So what did that look like growing up?
Well, my adoptive parents, and first let me tell you, Dmitri, that stress research now says that trauma can be passed down through the DNA for up to 13 generations. So trauma can shape the DNA, and that traumatic event that happened 13 generations ago can show up today. So we have no idea about what we're carrying ultimately in our being. The only thing that we can do is grow in our consciousness of the present moment, because we've all been shaped at such intricate, amazing, beautiful ways, whether it's through pain or whether it's through love. We just, you can't dissect all that. So for me, not only did I come into my parents' home as a stress sensitive, fearful child, but my dad was a Vietnam veteran. He was a child of an alcoholic. My mom was a child of an alcoholic. When my mom was 9 years old, her father had a heart attack. He was an alcoholic. He died in front of her at the kitchen table. And so she became parentified. My dad was parentified. So then I grew up with these hyper responsible adults who only knew hitting and yelling and taking stuff away for parenting. Now, a normal child, and I say normal just meaning a biological child without any significant trauma, who comes into the world and he's loved and he has a consistent family. Normal. There is no normal. Everyone's experienced trauma. But a normal child, because of the way their brains have been shaped in utero, as early in the first year, from conception to the first year, the human brain forms 1 million neural connections per second. Wow. Now wrap your mind around that. If anyone ever told you that the in utero period doesn't matter, it matters, and it matters in a big way. John Bowlby was the father of attachment. He said that the first 3 years of life establishes the blueprints for all of our future relationships. Well, the 90s was the decade of the brain, and in the 90s we learned that it's actually from conception to 5. From conception to 5 years old, the blueprints for all of your future social and emotional relationships get established. So this interaction and this communication that's occurring right now is manifested from our first conception to 5 years of life. If anything had been different, we wouldn't be having the same conversation. So I grew up in a home with parents who were loving and well-intentioned, but we were stressed out kids. I got into shit constantly. And worse than that was my sister. My sister is probably more the catalyst to why I do what I do than even me, because my sister was emotionally arrested. So she was she was premature. She weighed 3 pounds when she was born. She was 3 months premature. She spent the first 3 months of her life in an incubator. So when my sister was growing up, she was 5, but she acted like she was 2. She was 10. She acted like she was 7. She was 15. She acted like she was 10. And that just stressed my parents out. And she didn't do well in school because the school didn't know how to educate her, even though she was really smart. So she was chronically immature. And when you grow up in the environment that I did, emotional immaturity is looked at as not being smart or being now they call it, cognitively delayed, but back then they had worse words for it. And she did not get along with peers. She didn't get along in school. And so growing up in my home was like World War III, because every time my sister messed up, which was almost every day, she was either getting hit or she was getting yelled at. Now, I got my fair share of whippings. I got my fair share of getting yelled at, but I kind of stopped when I was about 10 or 11 years old, not because I stopped the behaviors, but because I got smart enough not to get caught. My behaviors were worse than my sister's. I wrote a book called The Great Behavior Breakdown that chronicles 26 severe behaviors that traumatized kids do. I did almost all 26 of them. But my sister was the target in my family. I wasn't. I got along well. I had good social and emotional relationships. I was good in school. I was a good athlete. It's because I had a good in utero experience. My biological mother enjoyed being pregnant. She didn't smoke. She didn't drink. She ate good food. She exercised. She just couldn't keep me. And so I had a completely different in utero experience than my sister did. So then you take that and you move that into our homes with hyper responsible adults who hit and yell. It just creates more stress for us as kids. And guess what stress does? In times of stress, this is so important. And it's like this one little thing, this one little concept, and there are several I could share that I feel like if people could just grasp them for kids at all levels, because this is human behavior, whether it doesn't matter if you're adopted or foster child or biological or a grandchild, it doesn't matter. In times of stress, our thinking becomes confused and distorted. When we're stressed, all of us, and it happens like that, we're not thinking clearly. And our short-term memory turns off. So not only are we not thinking clearly, we cannot remember. But what we tend to do in that state is try to force kids to learn. We hit them, we yell at them, we get mad at them, we punish them, and then we expect them to learn. And see, what's happening is that's called a negative feedback loop. Because not only are the kids too stressed out to learn, but we're too stressed out to remember that hitting and yelling and punishing an already stressed out child who can't remember gets us the same result. So see, we keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result, and Einstein calls that insanity. And that's what we do in our society. That's what we do in relationships.
All right. Okay. I can go several different ways with this. I'm loving this. All right, B. So let's take the parent. Long day, been working, it's nighttime, trying to put the kid to bed. Kid's not having it. Kids are being kids, right? Delaying whatever it is, being frustrated. You're on your 80th time of telling them to brush their teeth. They haven't done it. And then something small happens and the parent hits that mode where they're about to start yelling and going in. You might have already said it, but what advice do you have for the parent to catch themselves before they get into the hitting, yelling, emotional state?
Okay, so first of all, this experience has happened over and over and over again. So it's not a new experience. So we have to just honor that. I mean, if a parent that's a negative feedback loop. So that's a conditioned negative feedback loop. The parent makes a statement, the child has a reaction, the parent makes another statement, the child has another reaction, and pretty soon they're all stuck in a negative feedback loop. So before I even get to that point, I'm going to ask the parent to take account of how they are emotionally showing up by the time the evening occurs. Because the first thing you said is the parent is tired. That's the first thing you said. So see, that right there is already setting up a potentially really stressful outcome just because the parent is tired. So I want to help the parent take care of themselves a little bit. See, I want to practice prevention more than I want to practice intervention, because at intervention, it's too late. At intervention, you need to be stopping afterwards. You need to be stopping and reflecting and thinking about how you could do differently. So I want the parent to do something to take care of themselves in the evening time, right? And I'm going to give you just some basic level stuff. So at 7:00, all the electronics go off and it's reading time. A little music, relaxing music comes on. It's reading time. All the big lights go down. You know, the kids can be in their room or they can be in the living room together, but everyone's pulling the sensory input down. And then at 7:30 or 7:45, mom or dad or parent is going to go say, hey, it's about bath time. I'm going to go ahead and go start your bath water. And that's all they're going to do. They're going to go start the bath water. And then at whatever time, they're going to go into the bathroom and they're going to say, hey, come on, it's time for your bath. And they're going to be sitting in the bathroom, and then they're going to wait. And you know what? Take a book with you. Take a book with you in case they dilly and dawdle and fool around. And what the parent would normally do is get stressed out. But what I want you to do is to realize that they're probably going to dilly and daddle and dawdle around. And I can go so deep into this stuff. Sometimes we don't even realize that some of our kids may have had trauma around bath. They may have had in utero trauma, and that's their first exposure to water. So they have sensory issues. So parents need to slow down and pay attention to what's overwhelming their kids instead of just making judgments that their children are being defiant and disrespectful and disobedient. So slow down and explore it. Maybe that freaking water doesn't feel good to your kid. Maybe they need really hot. Maybe they need really cold. Maybe they need lukewarm. See, we all have these conceptions of how we think things are supposed to be, and then we just run off the tracks with that. So just slow down, explore some of the sensory things, get a book, go in the bathroom, say, hey, it's time for the bath, and don't say another word. Sit there and read your book. Read your book. No one's going to die. See, that's the other thing. No one's going to die from not getting in that bathtub right then. No one's going to die. So chill. Because here's what happens. We get so worked up about, hey, and here's what you got to realize about the brain. Anytime you encounter anything new, the brain perceives it as a threat until deemed otherwise. So the moment you say bath time, that's called transition. That child has to make a transition. Now, here's what I like for adults to think about. When you're doing something you really enjoy doing, Dmitri, what's something you really enjoy doing? Like one of your most enjoyable tasks?
Task to do around the house or to relax?
Anything. Yeah, what makes you happy?
Sitting down on the couch with a bunch of snacks and reading a book.
Fantastic. How about you, Chris?
What makes me happy? I am most happy when I am doing jiu-jitsu or when I'm in my chair listening to a book.
Now, let's say both of you are in your chairs and you're reading or listening to a book, and you get to a really good part, and then your spouse says, hey, would you get up and go take the trash out and go take my car down and put some gas in it? Let's see how you two fools act. You are going to move because you're wise, all the dialogue's going to happen internally. But you are going to have so much overwhelm. But see, that's what we do. That's how we transition energy. See, you transition energy through attitudes, feelings, and behaviors. So you're going to have so much attitude being experienced, and you're going to hide it from your wife because don't give her that attitude, especially if it's getting close to nighttime in bed. You don't want to mess that up. So you're going to hold it and you're going to figure it out. And it's going to take you a minute to finish okay, honey. Finish your last page and put your little snacks away, and then you're going to go do what she asked. We don't give kids the same permission. We don't give kids the same grace. When we tell a kid to go take a bath, we go get in that bathtub. You see where I'm going with this?
I'll get my book tonight.
Bryan, this actually leads me to a question we've been exploring on the show quite a bit, and it's a two-parter, but I'll ask you the first part first. Is, in your opinion, what does it mean to be an adult?
I think to be an adult means to have first a mature brain. So that is a mature prefrontal cortex, and that mature brain giving you the ability to make life decisions for yourself and for those you care about. To me, that's being an adult.
One of the things we've uncovered so far, at least this is our working theory for the moment, is part of what makes an adult is holding two seemingly conflicting truths in your mind at the same time. And I'm wondering if you agree with that, and if there's two conflicting truths that you could think of that you hold.
Yeah, I'd have to have an example for that. I don't even know what that would look like.
An example would be, for example, like let's say that argument with the wife did end up happening, and you're really mad at her because she asked you to take out the trash, but at the same time, you know that you love her, and it's true. You're really frustrated and annoyed, but it's also true. It doesn't matter. You love her.
I can give you
Hmm.
another one, B, that
Okay.
is maybe a little more controversial as well.
Well, you're
I was
still going to have to take out that trash.
I was talking to my sister, and if I offend somebody, whatever. Um, we were talking about black-owned businesses, and we were talking about this. And she wanted to go to a bakery because it was black-owned. Um, and so here's the two conflicting things that and me and her went back and forth about this. Me, I believe representation matters. I met no black entrepreneurs growing up. Seeing one, when I first saw my black coach, it impacted me. I was like, well, we could be coaches. We could what? Like, so representation does matter. At the
Mhm.
same time, back to my sister asking to go to a black owned bakery, my first question was, is the cake good? These are two conflicting things that I held in my mind. So that's kind of where Dimitri's going.
Hmm. Well, I mean, I'm not going to disagree with that. I think being able to hold two conflicting truths and be able to choose one path is a pretty emotionally immature, yeah, a pretty emotionally mature response. So yeah, I think that's pretty significant.
Yeah. Uh,
Oh yeah, go ahead, Chris.
well, I want. Oh gosh, sorry, we have to edit that. Hold on, my guy's coming through in Skype, and I didn't put myself in what to call. So edit that, Dimitri,
All right,
please. Put this in set as busy. I will call back in. Sorry, guys.
you're
No
good.
problem.
A meeting. That was loud in my ear. Um. All right. So, oh gosh, there's somewhere I want to pick up. Okay, here. All right. So then we were talking about parents of young children like me, right? My daughter's 7. I get that thing at night with her where I get frustrated, and I've had a lot of help with it. And so, what you just said will help parents with young kids. There's going to be parents who are listening to this show right now, and they have teenagers or kids who are young adults, and they might have been just out of the house. So, for the parent who's like, you know what, it's too late, all the damage is done. They're a teenager or they're a young adult. I can't do anything. What advice do you have for the parent who's having that inner dialogue?
Well, I don't even know if it's so much advice as it is just a neurologic fact. Your prefrontal cortex is open for development and maturity throughout the lifespan. So there's never a late. It's never too late. An apology can repair so much. And I will just say that love is the most powerful healing force in the universe. So you get busy loving, you'll fix past hurts and past wounds and ask for forgiveness. You can fix that within moments time. It doesn't take forever. The problem is we have so much shame and fear about getting to the apology and asking for the forgiveness and showing up and practicing the love. We have so much fear that keeps us from getting to that. That's the only difficulty. But love's powerful, man. Love heals and it creates miracles.
I think I'm losing my words because it's simple and yet so difficult for all of us. In part, I think because of what we're used to doing and what we're being taught to do. But I think learning this strategy makes a lot of sense for anybody who's a parent, but anyone who's a human. And Bryan, I'm pretty sure anyone can go and get your books on Amazon or wherever, and super highly rated books. Look up Bryan Post books, and then Fear to Love University, right?
Mhm.
You can learn about everything there. And there's actually a whole amazing portfolio of content that Bryan's put together over the last 25 years that he's been in this business that is crazy. And I'll just want to mention that I mean, if it's okay, that you guys are coming out with an app, and I think this is going to help millions of people through that. So I'm really excited about that. And we're going to include the links in the stuff that you guys can read. But Bryan, I want to find out also more about you specifically in your journey, and also as an entrepreneur. We love having entrepreneurs on because they actually make a huge difference in the world. And there are people who are out there and that want to help others, and oftentimes they'll go into social work or something like that, but the impact is limited. You as an entrepreneur have been able to make a huge impact. Now I want to go back to age 25, where you were encouraged by that mentor of yours to start a business, but kind of put us in your mind at that time and over the next years and decades of how that developed in context of your expertise.
Well, when I found social work, I found a natural fit. After I got done playing football in college, I stumbled into a social work course, and then that was it. I was probably just off to the races from there. I went to graduate school because I didn't really know what else I was going to do. So I got into an advanced standing program, met my mentor there. He was a clinician, a psychotherapist. So he just kind of pulled me in, and that's just what I decided to do. Now I had all these authority issues, so I had a whole bunch of jobs. And then I landed in a job with an entrepreneur. He was not a clinician. He was an entrepreneur. But I was an entrepreneur from the time I was 6 years old. So as much as I was an entrepreneur, I was still very heart-centered, and I've been very heart-centered my entire life. But watching this entrepreneur run this heart-centered business, I felt a lot of frustration. So I remember, and I've always worked. I grew up in the country. My dad worked in a rock quarry for 35 years. My blueprints for hard work are like they're at the top of the food chart. So I work, and I'm working hard in this business. And I'm sure I was frustrated telling my mentor about this guy, because I was like, this guy's kind of a jerk. And he was just like, well, you could do that. You could do that business for yourself. And at first I was like, okay. And then I was driving home, and I thought, I could. And it's just like it re-sparked that old entrepreneurial thing I had from the time I was a kid, which then I found out later it's actually in my lineage. My great-grandfather was an entrepreneur. My grandfather, my biological father, was an entrepreneur. And so I started this business, and I worked. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter what you do. You have to be willing to work. And I was just thinking about when I started probably my biggest company to date. It was my wraparound program in California. I started it 5 years ago. I worked 7 days a week, 14-hour days. I drove hours upon hours upon hours and worked with 20, 30, 40 families at one time. I just worked. And that my mindset has always been to work, and I've always wanted to be successful. So I've always written my goals. And when I say always, I mean back as young as 20 years old, I'm writing goals. I'm listening to self-help, all the stuff, all the guys, all the dudes. And I'm educating myself, and I'm learning, and I'm taking action, and it's just like a snowball. You just keep doing it. And then everything doesn't always work out. I've started a bunch of businesses, and the majority of them did not work out. And I remember one of the most impactful ones is I thought I was on track for like doing really well, and almost overnight the rug got pulled completely out from under me. I was broke. I was so broke that I had to go live with my mother back in one of the bedrooms in our home. And I carry around this picture on my phone, and I share it in some of my lectures. I gave myself a couple of days to feel sorry for myself and get moved. But then I got back to work. I got back to work and I had to get this big full-size bed out of this little room because I didn't have any room to work. So I got rid of this full-size bed and I went and bought myself a little twin-size therapeutic mattress, a cushion that I could sleep on the floor. I got myself a desk that I had dragged from my last place I was living. I put the desk in front of the room, and at night I would pull out the little mattress, the little cushion, and I would sleep on the floor. In the mornings, I would wrap it up and I'd put it in my mom's room. So I had my office and I worked. I started doing Facebook Live videos. I started writing a book. I worked. I did Facebook Live videos every day for 2 years straight. Every day. I just worked because my goals are not going to happen unless I work towards them. And so, I'm very much into manifestation. I'm very much into the law of attraction. But the key is you just got to be willing to work towards whatever it is you want. And I've always just done that.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we haven't spent nearly as much time together as I would like, and you'll see why here in a moment. But given the work that you do, you have changed lives, and we could have a whole other podcast about the lives you've impacted doing the work you've done. Let's talk about my interaction with you, where I meet you in a room where there's some down to earth people, and there's some people who are not so down to earth, right? Lots of egos going on, and you and I first had our first meeting because you were like, "Hey man, what's up? Just hit me." You just gave me your number, like, "Hey man, hit me up," and kept going. And I remember that because that doesn't really happen at these types of events. Everybody's kind of like, and not everybody, but a lot of people, and some people are not as approachable or whatever. You're like, "Hey man, yeah, let's try it." You just gave me your number, and I remember that because I didn't know you, and so you never know what you're gonna get with people. I'm like, "Yo, that dude, that was dope." Like, made me feel welcome. Yeah, I want to talk to him and chop it up and whatever, which we did. But also, I think one of the things that I will never forget is I will never forget this. This was in October when we were in Mexico. And you and I were talking, and you were like, I asked you at the beach, "Hey man, what's going on?" You're like, "Oh, one foot in front of the other or whatever." And we kept it going. Then you came back, you're like, "Hey man, actually, that's not been the case. I have been making exponential growth." And you told me, you didn't tell me the truth. You're like, "Yeah, man, I've been really going at it. And let me tell you why. Here's this little book. You gave me a book called U Squared or U2 or whatever, or U Squared." And you said that played a role. And for me, October that event was a pivotal event for me. And then that book you gave me was the second domino in a series of stuff that's happened since. And whether you're cognizant of it or not, you've played a role in a direction change within my life, whether you're aware of it or not. And so, one, I want to thank you for that. And two, people talk, I know I'm rambling a lot, but people talk about changing the world. Little things like that, which you've done, that's what changing the world is. And so I guess off the top of your head, are there any other stories that you're aware of people whose lives, which I know you've made a significant impact? Do you have any off the top of your head that you care to share?
Oh, gosh, man, I've trained people who've went on and created. I have five. I can name 5 people right now who have been my students, who I have helped to go ahead and go start businesses, and those businesses, these are social service businesses, have changed thousands of lives.
Boy.
So for me, it is I want to always be a vessel of positivity, and I want to be a vessel of support and encouragement, because I believe I know we are all energy, and I know the more my energy flows, the more I can give that to other people, the more that's going to come back to me. And that day on the beach, when you asked me, see, I have this struggle sometimes between, I'm from the country, so I'm very humble as it is, and you country boy, you don't really talk about your stuff. I'm right now where I live, there are probably some of the richest people. Yellowstone, the series was filmed around here. There's so many billionaires around here, you'd never know. They're sitting down there at Teskey's Countryware drinking coffee in the mornings. And so and then I'm a social worker. So social workers are never supposed to make money. So I always have this conflict between being honest about what I'm doing and where things are going versus really downplaying it and not being honest. So that day on the beach, when you said, "How you doing?" I'm like, "Ah, man, I'm grinding along, putting one foot in front of the other." And then I realized that that's just a lie. That's just the truth is I'm making exponential growth. I challenge myself every single day. And when I say exponential growth, I mean, I got one business doing really well. I'm starting 3 more companies, and I have ambitions and plans for those to be mega companies. And so you need to know, and I need to honor that. And then from there, we just leave it from there.
It's one of the things that has become obvious talking to some of our guests who are successful, exceptional, working as a marketer for some businesses who um, have been able to affect a lot of people. Now, in this conversation with you, Bryan, and knowing you, so much of this is tied up in mindset and belief in what's possible and that I can do it. Where does that come from for you, and where can others get it?
Oh gosh, I don't know where it comes from, to be honest with you. It's just something that it was a seed that was already in there. And I think that we all have it. It's just a matter if we can step into it. But I'll tell you, Jesus said, ask and you shall receive, knock and it shall be opened unto you. The Bible says of 3 things, there are 3 things that if these 3 things, if you have these 3 things, you can have anything that you want. And it's faith, focus, and perseverance. Now, when you have faith and you believe that no matter what you do, if you keep going for it, one day it's going to manifest. One day it is going to happen. You are literally walking on blind faith. And the significance is you're climbing a mountain. And you know eventually if you keep putting one foot in front of the other, you're going to get to that top of that freaking mountain. Now here's the thing. I heard Mark Cuban once say, you don't do what you love what you do. And I love that. Because when you learn to love what you do, and I told my wife this the other day, I said, if I lost it everything, and if I had to start over working at Subway or McDonald's, I'd be the manager in no time at all because I would be at a whole nother level than anyone else around there. And then from there, I would just keep elevating. And so I have this image all the time of I'm climbing this mountain, and I love climbing this mountain, and it is exhausting, and it is stressful, and it is painful, and it's scary, and sometimes I don't sleep, and I get obsessed, and I'm going to climb that freaking mountain, or I'm going to die climbing it, and I'm going to be dead on the side. But either way, I am in love. I am in love. I have faith. And then I am focused. The times I've been the most successful is when I have been focused. The times I have been the least successful is when I have gone off on a rabbit chase of business and ventures and ideas that I have no damn idea and no business pursuing those businesses. And I have lost millions of dollars, not hundreds of thousands. I've lost millions of dollars pursuing these harebrained ass ideas and businesses that I had no business doing. But I learn when I'm focused. And right now I've got four businesses, and they're all connected. They're all connected. I can do one thing, and I can do that one thing and leverage it against all 4 businesses. So I'm focused, and I have perseverance. You just don't freaking quit. You just don't quit. You just don't quit. It doesn't matter what happened. You just don't quit. You just keep going. You just keep climbing that mountain. That's what it is.
I love the simplicity of it, right? It's replacing fear with love. It's replacing doubt with perseverance and faith. It's not that complicated, right?
It's not that complicated. It's not. It's not. We overcomplicate things because of our brain. See, our amygdala, it's that stress thing. You get stressed, your thinking becomes confused and distorted, and your short-term memory suppressed. The most impactful, most powerful thing that any of us can do from moment to moment, from day to day, is learn how to breathe. Learn how to breathe. Because breathing is your pathway to calming down your stress response in your brain. And it opens you up to everything else. But we get stressed and we stop breathing, and we're conditioned to hold our breaths and not breathe enough.
Dimitri, I'm not sure how we're doing on time here. What's it looking like, man?
Yeah, just last minute here.
Bryan, you're working on a bunch. You got a lot going on. Is there anything that you want to share with people?
Well, if you want to learn more about my parenting work, I wrote a book called From Fear to Love. It's sold over 1 million copies. You can get a free copy, an ebook copy. Just go to feartolove.com. You can download it for free. Like you said, everything's on Amazon, and I just launched I just launched 2 new companies. I just launched Fear to Love, feartolove.com, which is actually a coaching and certification company. So we're creating a whole certification program. But you can get the book, read it, and if you want to learn more, you want to learn how to impact other people, you want to learn how to change lives in your own lives, create a coaching business around love and around healing, then that's what Fear to Love is for. And then I just launched Bondify.ai, Bondify. Bondify.ai is the world's first AI-powered adoption parenting support tool and community for adoptive parents, giving them Bryan Post in their palm of their hand, on their phone, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can ask my AI any question and it will answer because it's all programmed with me. And the more you give it, the better I can respond to you. It supports you and guide you. And then we have educational resources and tools. And we have a whole community of adoptive parents because I don't want any adoptive parent growing up or growing their children up, parenting their children, feeling hopeless, feeling like they don't know where to turn, feeling like they don't know what to do, and knowing that what they're doing is not working, but not knowing what else to do. And that's what Bondify is for. And so I encourage, and you can, your readers, your listeners can sign up for it. They get the first 2 weeks for free to try it out. And if you don't like it, no problem. If you love it, we'll join the community. It's very simple.
I think it's so exciting to talk to you on the cusp of what will likely be probably the greatest impact that you've had and the culmination of everything you've been working towards your whole life. So this is terrific. And speaking of that app, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer. I'm sure everyone would love to have Bryan Post to answer their parenting questions anytime, 24/7, right when it happens. I think you guys need to sign up for the app as soon as you can, right? Do it right now, actually.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in getting certified to be helping others, I mean, get into that certification program as it's coming up. So, Bryan, it's I mean, we just scratched the surface. In fact, I have written down on what position did you play in football in college? We got to know before we get off here.
I was a defensive end in college and a linebacker.
Wow, defensive end. So you're fast.
Not as fast anymore. I was okay.
All right, Bryan. Well, thank you so much for coming on the Big Life Podcast, and
Thank you guys.
looking forward to seeing you soon.
Peace.
It's been a pleasure.